culture, cultural and religious basis for exclusion or non-recognition, and some of the prejudices and stereotype response to these communities. I also I hope to draw our attention to evolving trend, how things change. And what can we do to break these barriers? And then I'll be up and available for questions, to provide answers to some questions or support clarifications where necessary. And so when we talk about recognition and inclusion of LGBTQ sex workers and people who use drugs, I mean, we are all evident, whether we are part of any of these communities or not, we understand clearly that the societal structure do not make provision, especially in this part of the world, do not make provisions for example, representatives or people who use drugs. So if you're a drug user, you are qualified for certain position, you can contest for certain position, or if you're a sex worker, show up. In fact, the environment itself do not encourage people who belong to these communities to show up. Yes, remember we have the social identity theory where people belong to different categories of social categories. You could, of race, probably sex or tribe, political affiliations, religious connections, people, LGBTQ people or sex workers or people who use drugs belong to these other categories. So when engaging in their community structure, they engage in those other categories and not necessarily as people who use drugs or sex workers or LGBTQ. And that is because the societal structure do not make provisions to accommodate these communities. And therefore, it means they are not recognized. I mean, for those who probably hear or know about them, they see these people as irregular people, irregular set of people, you know. And interestingly, these people who live with us, they live amongst us, they are family members, they are friends, they are colleagues, some are siblings, some are children, right? So that's the concept of, well, that's a partial presentation on the concept of recognition and inclusion. It means they are asking for structural provisions, societal structures to make provisions for the accommodation and recognition of these people. It is important because it informs policy decision making. It informs development planning. It informs a lot of advancement in our countries. You must have found out in most cases, people say, oh, I didn't know my relative was on drug. I didn't know my relative was a sex worker. I didn't know that this guy was a gay. I didn't know my child was a lesbian. But that is also because society has failed to make provisions for their recognition and inclusion. Now, my next subject would be culture, religion, and society. What's the nexus? You know, religion and culture are part of each other. Culture affects religion and religion affects culture. I mean, in wider studies have also proven or shown how culture influences laws. But today we're not talking about laws. We're talking about culture and religion and society. So the same religion, one particular religion may have different forms of different cultures. And within one culture, we could have different religions, right? So they are kind of interrelated and intertwined. So just socio-culturalism, these are arrays of societal and cultural influences on the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave. Whilst religion itself is also belief that practices to a supernatural being of power, but also have to do with society, how we then deploy our beliefs, how we deploy our practices, religious practices in our environment. with people? How do we relate with people based on what we believe? So this is where religion and culture comes into play. Of course, predominantly we have Islam and Christianity, especially in this part of the world. Rastafarianism is also another set of religion that is seeking recognition as an official religion so that they could practice their religion. So they are falling back on constitutions that have provisions about non-discrimination against religion or religious affiliations. So there's a Rastafarian movement. And I mentioned it in this slide because we would have to have a look at how religion and substance use and sex and sexuality serve as barrier to these communities. So culture and religion play a very strong and influential role in shaping our society. The way we dress, the way we talk, our perception, our attitude, our conviction, our core values. So whether positive or negative, these are the sources of some of these barriers: religion and culture. So I want to talk about the shared values of culture and religion. Whilst a lot of culture may conflict with religious beliefs, I noticed that they seem to agree on the non-recognition and exclusion of LGBT sex workers and people who use drugs, especially when it comes to sex and sexuality. Religion and culture have almost similar conclusions on sex and sexuality when it comes to LGBTQ and commercial sex. And also mind-altering substances, which has to do with people who use drugs. Religion and, I mean, there may be differences. They may differ or vary from one culture to another. We'll get into that later. But predominantly religion, whichever the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, most of these ones have a stand on sex and sexuality that are almost similar to the other. So their shared values are around sex and sexuality, mind-altering substances. Now, some of the barriers culture and religion provide are shared values. Most cultures in the region, major religions, especially the Orthodox element, by doctrine, they are doctrines. They oppose to LGBTQ, sex work, and people who use and drug use. That's the doctrine for most of the religions that we know or cultures around the region. There may be exceptions, I emphasize, but for the most part, doctrinally, they oppose LGBTQ, sex work, and drug use. Now, some of the bases for this exclusion. I mentioned social identity theory earlier on, which talks about grouping of people, how they feel about their own group and how they feel about other groups. But it's just a confirmation of the root of culture and religion, which is morality. It takes us back to the story of creation. We're talking of the barriers. It takes us back, if it's rooted in morality, from which culture and religion is established. It takes us back to the story of creation, which poses some of these barriers. Remember, culture and religion shape the way we think. We are not talking about legislations today, but also how they influence legislation and how these legislations are barriers. So cultural and religious basis for exclusion, sex and sexuality. From creation, we understand it's only male and female that were created. We understand that we are distinct from the other by our sexual organs, which were created for purpose. And that purpose is nothing less than recreation or procreation of the human race or animal race, but in this case, humans. So our sexual organs is widely believed that they are inconvertible. They cannot be converted. So it makes it in our thinking, in our belief system, that a man can never become a woman and a woman can never become a man, regardless of how much of hormonal differences there are. The marchandization of sex is immoral as far as these religions are concerned, as far as our cultures are concerned. And that is why when the history taken back to the Adamic religions and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then came the term sodomy. A male cannot be a female cannot be a male. From creation, that's the understanding, that's the perception, that's the belief. Even if they can be, there's no need for them to be. That is what culture is telling us. That's what religion is telling us, because that is what creation has made. And therefore, creation must not or cannot be altered. There's a sex after marriage concept. Most society today still hold that. Most religion share this value that sex outside marriage is unacceptable, is immoral, it's a sin, to some extent becoming a crime with heavy punishment in some cultures. So that is how religion and culture place so much significance on sex and sexuality. So for sex, there's sex for reproduction. And if sex is for reproduction, we're talking about the basis for exclusion. And the argument is that these are some of the arguments. I mean, you are listening to me, you may have more arguments than I may be presenting now. So there's no homosex, because homosex do not lead to reproduction. Now, there's also sex for recreation, for pleasure, which is also restricted. So sexuality is a restrictive concept in religion and culture. So society went further or took up some culture of assigning roles and responsibility to these sexes that falls under gender roles. So female are expected to act, talk, and dress in a certain way. Men are expected to talk, dress, and act in a certain way. And therefore, because they're expected to do these things, society created its structures to accommodate the expected attitude, behavior, and dress. Acceptable behaviors and practices for men are also part of the barriers. Let's take into account the use of, let's even take cigarette smoking. Most society would honor men who smoke. Others, we have a different look at women who smoke. And that is the ascription of roles and responsibilities and expectations. Now let's go to religion, culture, religion and mind-altering substances, drugs. Remember, alcohol is inclusive. Remember, nicotine inclusive. Remember, caffeine inclusive. These are all drugs. So mind altering for religion through natural means like meditation or other thought-provoking means are acceptable. They fall under religious practices. They don't believe that you need to take substance to alter your mind, the way you think. Other culture believe that, and religion, for example, I mentioned, and this is the reason why I mentioned Rastafarianism before, whilst other cultures see cannabis as a drug, the Rastafarian religion do not see it as that. They see it as one of the sacraments, the religious rites that they perform, the rituals. So they need to take those substances. They need to take those substances. Some culture will have to take those substances to be able to relate with their God. So this is where we face differences in culture and religious perception with regards to mind-altering substances. There are other cultures where people, they drink attire, they drink coffee, they take tobacco. I mean, growing up, we could see our grandparents taking tobacco, snort. It was largely accepted. I mean, even nicotine is accepted in most of our culture. Until recently, they've started putting up strong regulations against tobacco consumption. Yeah, so a lot of culture practice the use of mind-altering substances. Others don't believe in the substance to alter your mind and your body. That comes in drug use. Another barrier is the prejudice, stereotypic response. We see people as, in most of, the places based on my interaction and experience with people where we have worked, especially in this part of the world, they see LGBTQ commercial sex workers, they call prostitutes, and people who use drugs, cocaine, cannabis, kush, what have you, as devilish. They see these people as evil, and therefore that's just that perception. And the root is from culture and religion, seeing it as evil. They see it as devilish. And therefore people are engaged into these activities, or who think about these activities, or who tolerate activities like this must be punished or banished, disowned. They are not fit to be amongst us. That's the prejudice. That's the stereotypic thinking. It's a great, great barrier. So imagine people who think like this, who have this kind of belief, whether it's from culture, whether it's from religion, sit in a place or a space where policies are regulated, are formulated, or are implemented. They're going to have a biased position on that. So it becomes a very strong barrier. Most people think, oh, this is Westerner. It's a Western idea. It's not part of our culture. But let's even say it is, which I don't believe it is. It's just part of human race. Drugs have been here for the longest of time. The last time I checked my Bible, I read about a prostitute. The last time I checked the same scripture, I heard about homosexuality and all of that. So they've been here long enough. But let's even say it's a Western idea. So which part of the Western culture we want to imbibe? Remember, they said religion came down from the West. But because of globalization, where do we want to stand on different things? They are considered as good for nothing. They are considered as bad influences in our society. They spread disease in our society. They are outlaws and outcasts. This is how we see people who use drugs, sex workers, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queers. That's how we see them. They're part of our society. They're also part of our family, community, schools, offices. They're with us. They're here. They've been here for a while now. This perception is a barrier. But I want to bring our attention to the fact that things are evolving. Greece, one of the most orthodox, Christian Orthodox country, is considering same-sex. The Catholic mission itself which is so much influential in the sub-Saharan Africa. Schools and in education and health are taking a stance on this matter. Yes, one or two are falling away. It's a strong thing, but you have to recognize that there's an evolution in the trend. Things are changing. Things are changing. And therefore, we have to pay attention and probably change our perception, especially for advocates like us who have been advocating for the decriminalization of drug use for some time now. We've seen this come to pass because criminalization hasn't worked. Who knows? Maybe exclusion and non-recognition may not work. I remember when the AIDS pandemic came and all of the messaging around it, people were scared to show up that they had AIDS, and it had to spread the more until it was revealed that it's not a death sentence. I mean, we have to encourage people to show up so that we can help them, especially those who need help. So this is an evolution. Just talking about drugs itself, it's been legalized from different quarters, different elements, different forms of legalization, different forms of regulation, and all of that. So this is just to draw attention to the evolving trend. Now, I'll close by discussing how some of the ways that there could be thousands of ways, depending on who is taking the initiative, breaking the barriers, these barriers that we have spoken about. I mean, this is inexhaustive, remember. There are lots that you are thinking about or thinking of at the moment as I make my presentation that may not have been included in this. But for those that have been included here and those that have not, change begins with me. And that is how I started changing to be in the position to make this presentation. It starts with me. And how did it start? I wanted to understand who these people are. And then I found out that they are people like me. Going back to the scriptures, we're all created in the image and likeness of God. We didn't create ourselves. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? From another planet? No, from the planet Earth. And when I understood that, I started engaging with an open mind and following up on science. I've spoken to a lot of people in these communities to know why they do what they do and how they do it and how they see themselves and why they see themselves like that. Why? It is critical. So if we have to break this barrier, it must start with us. I want to encourage all of us who are listening to begin to understand, to take the same approach if you can. If you have a better approach, you could. Why not? Take that approach. But lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender, queers, and sex workers, the prostitutes, in quotes, that you see in the street who sell sex, the people who use drugs, cocaine, heroin, cannabis, kush, whatever it is, are human beings like us. They must have a reason why. It may not be legitimate to us, but they have a reason. Because we all do things that we do for a reason. So let's get close and listen to their story. It will amaze you what the story is. I remember listening to one of Oprah's motivational programs, and she said she interviewed a Sunday school teacher who was a prostitute at night, but a Sunday school teacher in the day. Most of the people you see begging on the street have kids to take care of, but they don't know what to do, so they show up to beg. Their stories. So let's listen to their stories. It might help. I want to close by saying it is about compassion and not condemnation. Thank you very much. I will stay for questions, comments, and observations. Thank you very much. Over to you, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much, Prince, for this wonderful presentation. I can see a hand up. Let me see whose hand is up. Okay, I think the hand. Okay. So Gloria has a hands on. Okay, Gloria, the floor is open.
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you so much, Prince, for this amazing presentation. Uh, I love the outline and then how you arranged everything in the slide because it gives you a fair idea of what you're talking about, and then you are able to resonate it within your community or within your locality where you come from. My little add up on would be on the trends that I wanted to also add that having open dialogues, with the older folks, with our traditional and religious leaders on trends and things that are evolving would also help. It will encourage to 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 bring acceptance in the society for these three communities, that's the LGBT community, sex workers, and the drug users community. Because one of the things I realize is that when something is trending on the internet, our mothers and our fathers back home may not really understand or hear about it. But the more we talk about it with them, oh, I saw this thing on the internet, and then this is what it says, this is what it says. It says this, it says that. Gradually, we are able to build a dialogue through that. And then we get them to come on board to understand the reason why these things are happening. If it's for the positive, of course, it should be. If it's of the negative too, we ask them of their advice. So if you want to make sure that sex workers, drug users, and LGBT persons are more accepted, we can also go through the traditional, the local way by having open dialogues with our older folks within our communities, within our families, for them to know that yes, these people were created by God. These people belong to families. These people are not they didn't just appear in the world, out of their own will, but they were brought into this world for a purpose. And I think through that, we'll be able to curb the discrimination and then the other dangers that these communities face day in and out in our societies. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Gloria. I mean, we would definitely have a roundtable discussion. I think I have a few questions that we would have to look at and then talk about it. So, colleagues, if anyone has a contribution, comment, or any add up to what has been presented so far, kindly unmute yourself and then make your submission. Okay, I can't see any hand up. All right. So thank you very much, Prince, for this presentation. It was really amazing, or probably done to actually. I mean, that is why we're actually looking at the topic. So moving from this, we would have to delve into some questions. The PowerPoint slides has, or probably the presentation has answered some few questions that I have, but it is wise that we would have to still discuss others that have not been answered. And Gloria, thank you very much for the other. So we will definitely come to you with regards to your work as a human rights defender, and then I know you've done a couple of work involving churches, mosques, and then the traditional council. So I would definitely be throwing up a question. So I think I can't see anyone's hands up. So Praise and Gloria, I mean, what we have discussed so far, it's something that is a day-to-day something that we are discussing. I mean, this is not new. For colleagues who are also here, I believe that this is not new to you as well. So the first question for us to begin with the roundtable discussion will be to Praise, Gloria, and then to colleagues over here. Is prayer enough? Looking at some of the religious factors that have been mentioned, or religious factors that we know, when it comes to sex workers, LGBTQ, and people who use drugs, particularly in our setting, where, I mean, Prince mentioned in the Bible, there's even a prostitution in the Bible. I mean, there are a lot of forms of drugs. We all use drugs one way or the other, but we tend to discriminate people uh, uh, who use it more than we often do. We tend to discriminate them, and we tend to also discriminate people who have a different opinion on what gender is, and then sex workers as well. So now the question is prayer enough?
Okay, so can I go first?
Yes, please, you can.
All right, thank you. I think the question is prayer enough is going to be relative, depending on who is offering the prayer and who the prayer is being offered to. Because if we take these three communities, the sex workers, the drug users, and in the LGBT persons, individual persons who believe in God, who continue to follow their cultural norms and their traditions, irrespective of how even society deals with them. Some of them still believe prayer can go a long way in their lives. Of course, they may pray for protection, they may pray for favor, and they may pray, for things to change. Maybe people offer prayers for them not to find themselves in police custodies. People offer prayers for them not to have issues with leaders within a particular setting or even in a country. So prayer would be relative in this time, from my perspective, because I see sex workers before they go out to work, they offer a prayer. Drug users, people use drugs and they still pray. We have people in mosques, churches, everywhere who use drugs. Some of them even abuse it than you can imagine, but they still pray. Same comes to the LGBT persons as well. So in this regard, prayer, depending on how it's being prayed and who is being prayed to, because we spoke about the different religious backgrounds.
Yeah.
We always mention the majority, that's the Islamic, Christianity, and then the traditional living out. Like today, we spoke a bit about the Rastafarian culture as well, and then we have other cultures and religions and how they resonate with their prayers, how they offer their prayers, and how they get their prayers answered to their requests. So in this regard, I would say that in a way, prayer can change certain things depending on how it's done and the belief that the person offering the prayer and who the prayer has been offered to, the belief they hold for that person to make it, I mean, to make it possible for them to stay safe or to stay protected. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. I think I would allow Prince to also add before, because I have a follow-up question on that as well. Prince, the floor is open.
Yes, Mike said if prayer was enough to,
Yes. If prayer is enough, I mean, looking at these three communities, I mean, okay, so let me make a point. I mean, so let me just give the follow-up question to why I ask if prayer is enough. You sometimes find even in Ghana here, I mean, there are other regions where there are harm reduction centers. But in Ghana here, we do not have harm reduction. And when we talk about harm reduction is a center where people who misuse or probably use something that is supposed to be used one, they use it more. There's a way where they find solutions to their challenges. Now, having engaged with a few people in the sex work, LGBTQ, and people who use drugs, basing it on drug users, you realize that we have rehabilitation centers. Rehabilitation centers are mostly prayer centers where people who use drugs are being sent for them to be prayed for them to be kept there, and then to come out from their situation. So now it comes back to the question: is only prayer enough to solve the challenges that some of the challenges that these people go through? Is prayer enough?
Yeah, so because also all of these come from different backgrounds to meet in this community. It will depend on who, because I remember the last session we had with the office, the last two support don't punish session we had, and we had for the guys who came from the rehab center. Somebody said prayer worked for him. If our prayer is the only thing that works for him. Another person said the AA, the Alcohol Anonymous causes worked for them. Another person said detox worked for them. So it's really a multi-dimensional approach, but we can say yes, for some people, prayer is all they need. I remember my last engagement with the Kush guys. They said Kush was demonic and it was only prayer that could help them. And whatever that is, I don't know. But yes, it's not, prayer cannot be a silver bullet for everyone. But there are categories of people in these communities who prayer can work for. But a multi-dimensional approach is required to know who prayer works for.
Okay. I mean, we all will understand, or will take it from different angle. I mean, prayer work in a way. So probably we would just, I mean, depending on who the prayer is being prayed for and who is even offering the prayer. Okay. So moving to the next question. Now, the next question would have to do with movement building. I think with this one, we would have to relate it to the LGBTQI community. Now, Gloria and Prince, the question is, apart from sexual intercourse, which is usually used as a basis to discriminate against the LGBTI community, when that is being taken out, shouldn't everyone has the right to belong to an association or to belong to a movement?
Okay, I think Prince is leaving for me to go first. I'll go first again. Well, for me, I don't think it should be, because they say our elders say that life is full of uncertainties, and you can't really tell what might happen tomorrow. That is why movement building, it's very necessary, and it's important to include everybody. It's important to make it inclusive so that it opens the doors for other people to join, and then they would be able to share whatever they have to share, to make sure and work together to make sure that that movement becomes strong, and then it's moving according to its goals and its objectives.
Okay.
I don't see the reason why, if I choose who I would want to have a sexual intercourse with, that should be a reason for you to make me a part of your movement. Yes, I understand that every movement have its rules and regulations. Everybody have their laws that they work with, but there are always exceptions. And when it comes to this particular question that you asked, there should be an exception, because we are talking about the people we live with in our communities, in our societies. And looking at the movement building, at the end of the day, the target groups are the communities, are the societies. So why then would you want to discriminate against certain people because you don't see them to be fit according to how you want or how you wish they would live their lives. So you want to put them aside, discriminate towards them, because at the end of the day, we are not getting anywhere. I quite remember during the interview session when we're trying to put together the document. Against every day.
Personnes dans la société qui
the government wants to make sure
alors le gouvernement doit se rassurer d'avoir
granting them the access to vote, granting them the voters ID card for them to vote. And I think when they are getting the cards to the people, they need to also consider all of those things, but they wouldn't. Why? Because they know that it's not the right thing to do. But then when it comes to laws, they feel it's the right thing to do because it benefits them at the end of the day. So to me, I don't think it should be. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Prince, do you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, I just picked up the element of voting. I like that story part of it. But the irony also is people vote. So if LGBTQ people who use drugs vote
des
for
personnes font des votes
government or different political party or government setup, it means they are voting for their non-recognition, right?
Yeah.
That's an irony because the same government that is failing to recognize you, you voted for. The same government that is criminalizing drug use, users voted for. So that's a very good bargaining point. So if these people are outcasts, these people are good for nothing, these people are outlaws, these people are whatever they are, why do we want them to vote for us? And Constitution prohibits or stops people from contesting or being contested or voting for is when you are mentally incapacitated to do that. But to your question, yes, it is free, is a fundamental freedom, human right for freedom of association. You are free to associate with whatever association you want to associate. But of course, the environment, legal and regulatory environment, there are exceptions. So some of these associations and assemblies are criminalized in different laws that are not the Constitution, but it's a fundamental human right to freely associate with any group that you want to.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think that point is well noted. So, I mean, overcoming challenges. Prince, you mentioned that it actually starts with us. So, I mean, I think that question has really been answered. And then, so when we are looking at intersectionality, I mean, where religious factors intersect with other aspects of such as gender, ethnicity, socio-economic status, in, I mean, creating barriers. What are some of the comprehensive approaches? I know you've addressed some of this, but then what are some of the comprehensive approaches that can address this? So the questions goes to Gloria. So having worked with a lot of churches, or let me just say religious community, including the traditional, what are some of the comprehensive approach? I mean, it could be a way of addressing some of these things. What are some of the things that you think could be done to address these challenges?
Yes. Thank you. So, with regards to religious and traditional, communities, for them, the first thing they usually base on is their morals.
It was not informed.
You don't do anything which falls within their moral. They don't really recognize you. They see you as being possessed or being an outcast out there. So they don't really want to have anything to do with you unless you want to covet and follow their rules and their principles before they would be able to to even associate themselves with you. But I think one of the things that should continue is the um, engagement with them as well as sensitization and awareness creation, because through that we've been able to build allies from the same religious and traditional communities, because the more you sensitize them, the more you create awareness and engage with them, you get to realize that some of them did not really understand the situation on the ground. Most of them based on hearsays and what their leaders tell them. But with time, when they come to understand the situation on the ground, that it could even be their family member or their child or their mother or their father, or even them, that could be, involved in the situation they are trying to create, then they tend to, you know, give you an open arms. They tend to open up to you, and they also give you some guidelines you should use, maybe moving forward. That would also help to, maintain a safe and a more inclusive community for the target that you really want to reach out to. So one of the things we noticed that we shouldn't do away with at all is just continue sensitizing them, creating more awareness and engaging with them. It's not always, it shouldn't always have to be bringing them together, but it could be a one-on-one visit. You could visit their homes or their palaces. Just have normal conversations with them, and then you give them the chance for them to also open up. Then from there, you can know where to touch, and then we move on with the advocacy work that you want to do over there. Please, I hope this is enough to answer your question.
Yes, I mean, it's enough.
Okay.
Because I mean, one of the key takeaway from what you said is that unless the thing happens to most of the communities before they tend to give in or probably give advice on what we have to do. And then you also mentioned the sensitization, where it would have to be a dialogue. I mean, going to the traditional council or probably visiting these churches to have a one-on-one dialogue with them. So I mean, it cuts across all the three communities that we are looking at today. When it comes to socio-cultural and religious barrier, it cuts across. I mean, when it has to do with people who use drugs, when it has to do with sex workers, it is only when the person in question or probably somebody is being faced by such situation before they tend to give you the listening ears on all those things. And it happens in almost all the fields. Even when you see people on the street demonstrating, because one or two people, it does not affect them, they tend to be against it. But when it is them, they tend to give you the support. Okay. So Prince, would you also want to add to what Gloria has said?
Well, not anything different. I mean, like I said earlier, let's understand who these people are, get close to them, talk to them, and then we'll understand how they feel about life, and then it will help us not to be judging.
All right, thank you very much. So before we wrap up, there are a number of people here. I would want to hear from you. If you also have your question or probably a submission that you would want to make, the floor is open. Kindly use the hand raising icon, and then I'll call you to make your submission. Anyone? Anyone, please?
Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un, s'il vous plaît? Quelqu'un avec une contribution ou une question?
Okay, so in the absence of any question or have any suggestion, we will want to have the final words from Gloria and Prince. But before that, we will be sending a feedback form to colleagues who have joined for you to give us a feedback on what has been discussed here. What were some of the things that you were expecting for it to be addressed, but you couldn't have the chance to hear that from us. We understand the enclosed space in which we work in, so we are fully aware of some of the submissions and why some people would not want to make comments. But then we'll be sharing a link, a feedback link, for you to put your submission in there. And also, you can feel free to get in touch with us at any time and point where you want to include your opinion. Once again, this webinar is not the first one. We'll be having the second session in March. The second session, we'll be looking at the policies and laws. That is why today we actually focus on only religion and socio-cultural. So second session, we'll be looking at the policies and laws. In the third session, we'll be looking at violation and discrimination. And then after we've received all your feedback, we will then include them in the communique that will be sent to ECOWAS. And then we would have the final webinar to agree on some of the things that were suggested. Which one should we take out? Which one should be left in? And which one should be included so that we can make the submission to ECOWAS. So without much ado, I would want to call on Gloria to give her final remarks, and then Prince.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. So, well, for me, my final words will not be much, but before I say the final words, I just want to
J'aimerais juste dire
repeat again that, human rights and inclusion work under the social, cultural, and religious, sector is not an easy thing because, we are dealing with people who are living their lives based on norms. They are living their lives based on, history. They are living their lives based on what they believe in. So it's not really an easy thing, going to them and telling them, look, these people, the sex workers, LGBT community, and the drug users are humans just like you, and they belong to your communities, they belong to your families. So you need to protect them. But I believe that we can start by first focusing on the public opinion and attitudes. What are some of the attitudes that these religious and cultural barriers, like we had them listed during the presentation that Prince did. Now we move to the public, and then we want to understand their opinions, see their attitudes when it comes to three communities that have been listed, because then and there it helps us to know where we should go to and who we should reach out to if we want to change or at least influence the opinions and then the mindsets that these people have towards the three key population community. Another thing we shouldn't also stop doing is raising awareness on stigma and discrimination. because it's part of our everyday life. People discriminate without even knowing they are discriminating.
Et les gens discriminent les gens sans savoir pourquoi.
Continue, because it helps you to know what has been done. Some years ago, we had for Ghana here, we have the National Civic for National, is that the NCCE? Yeah. They usually give out education and information throughout the TV and the radio stations. Like earlier on, we mentioned of the HIV issue came about. People were scared, but with time, they got to know that HIV isn't something deadly. You can still be HIV positive and have a baby, and your baby would be HIV negative and all of that. So yes, we need to continue in that direction. We are dealing with culture and religious societies, because they come with a full force. They are not easy to break through like that, but gradually we can believe that the advocacy work we are doing for these three communities under the cultural and the religious aspects would yield results. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gloria. Okay, Prince, your final words.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again to our participants for spending this time with us, and I hope this session has been productive, useful, and informative. And I hope to see them in our next webinar.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think I've seen a comment. Let me see what it is. I think Fofana is talking about the interpretation. Let me see. So this is the end of the webinar. Fofana, unfortunately, I think you joined late, so I'm not sure you were able to select the interpretation icon, because the interpretation is working perfectly on the Francophone side. That being said, I would like to say thank you to all of you who have joined this webinar. We hope to see you in the next session, and we would plead that when the feedback is sent, you would be able to put in your comment, the suggestions, and then we'll take it from there. So once again, on behalf of the WADPN and our partners, and then of course our supporter, our donor, Initiative Sankofa, the Africa West, is DAO, and our other partners, IGNOA from Ghana, Aweya in Burkina Faso, Colibri in Burkina Faso, and also we have the Nigeria Sex Workers Association in Nigeria, and then we have Icheri. It's actually a very long name, so I have to just mention the abbreviation. In Nigeria, would like to say thank you. Thank you very much for your support and your assist. We would like to say thank you to you who have joined. We'd like to also say thank you to our interpreters, even though we had a challenge from the beginning, but you were able to pull up your weight. Thank you very much. And I would like to say bye-bye for now.